We're all told, of course, the debate is over and that all the scientists agree. I like to call this the emperor's new clothes argument. And as all of you know, that is simply not the case. But now I'd like to address myself to a serious and grim subject, and that is the actual threat that global warming poses to our planet, and most specifically to California. And that is a very real and devastating one. I speak specifically of the radical policies that the global warmongers are now enacting. In the summer of 2006, in the name of saving the planet from global warming, California adopted the most radically restrictive legislation anywhere on the planet. It included AB 32, which requires a 25% reduction in man-made carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2020. Now, to put this in perspective, we could junk every car in the state of California right now and not meet that mandate. At about the same time, the same politicians who adopted these measures also adopted $40 billion of bonds that they promised would be used for highways, dams, aqueducts, and other capital improvements. Now, here's the problem. Building highways and dams and aqueducts requires tremendous amounts of cement. How is cement produced? Well, it's produced by taking limestone and superheating it into a molten state. It comes out the other side as a compound called clinker. Clinker is about 2/3 the weight of the original limestone. The missing third of that weight is carbon dioxide. And when you include the emissions required to superheat the limestone, it turns out that for every ton of cement, a ton of carbon dioxide is released. It's the third biggest source of carbon dioxide in all human enterprise. But now we have a law that specifically forbids us from doing so. That was the essence of the lawsuits that were filed against construction projects and are being filed against construction projects across our state. So construction is history. Agriculture is in big trouble too, and agriculture is California's #1 industry. You can start with nitrogen fertilizer, which is a critical component of all agricultural activity. Unfortunately, it produces large amounts of nitrous oxide, another so-called greenhouse gas that has to be radically curtailed in California. The wine industry is also in for a shock. Fermentation of wine occurs when a molecule of glucose in the grapes is converted into equal parts of alcohol and carbon dioxide. And the biggest agricultural impact is our state administration's mandate for heavily subsidized use of ethanol fuel. Ethanol is produced in exactly the same way as alcohol and wine. The glucose in corn is converted into equal parts of ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. Following AB 32, this administration imposed a requirement that all gasoline sold in California by next year must be comprised of at least 10% ethanol, which doubles the current mandate. Now, any of you who brought pocket calculators, pull them out and walk through this with me. 1 acre of corn produces about 350 gallons of ethanol. There are 15 billion gallons of gasoline used in California each year. So in order to meet the 10% requirement in 3 years, it means converting 4.3 million acres of farmland to ethanol production. Now that's a lot of farmland considering we only have 11 million of acres producing crops of any kind in California. So the current ethanol mandates are already producing serious shortages in other parts of the world as farmland that had been producing food shifts to ethanol to chase hundreds of millions of dollars of government subsidies that are coming out of our pockets. And we're seeing this across the board. And as you see your grocery prices rise as a result of this policy, just be glad you're not in the third world. Food is still a relatively small portion of family incomes in affluent nations. It consumes more than half of family earnings in third world countries. So when the global warming alarmists predict worldwide starvation, they're right. They're causing it. Electricity prices are also taking a heavy hit. California already suffers the highest electricity prices in the continental United States, and that situation is about to get worse. A companion measure to AB 32 was SB 1368. That prohibits the importation of electricity produced by coal, even state-of-the-art EPA-approved power plants thousands of miles from California. Truckee became the first victim of this law. Truckee was about to sign a 50-year contract for electricity produced by a new coal-fired plant in the state of Utah. They were forced to back off because of this legislation. Now, the original contract was for $35 per megawatt hour. The green replacement power will cost Truckee consumers $65 per megawatt hour. There's one other thing that strikes me on this issue, and that's how puny is the amount of carbon dioxide produced by human enterprise compared to simple natural processes. The AB 32 mandate is to reduce man-made carbon dioxide emissions in California by 170 million metric tons per year. That's what all of this tremendous economic dislocation is about. Now, let me mention one other man-made source of carbon dioxide that they don't count. Every one of us in this room will produce about 2.2 pounds of carbon dioxide a day by deliberately, willfully breathing. Now, again, pull out those pocket calculators. That's 800 pounds of carbon dioxide each year. There are 6.6 billion of us on this planet. That comes to 5.3 trillion pounds, or 2.4 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide simply through the process of human respiration, and that's before you add in all the cats and rats and elephants around the world. So there are 2.4 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions worldwide by human breathing, and 170 million metric tons is what all the fuss is about in California. The Obama administration's just unveiled its budget, a $3.6 trillion monstrosity that includes some $650 billion in business taxes. They call it cap and trade, but what they really mean is cap and tax. The problem, of course, with business taxes is that businesses don't pay them. Business taxes can only be paid in one of three ways. Business taxes are either paid by us as consumers through higher prices, by us as employees through lower wages, or by us as investors through lower earnings, mainly on what's left of our 401ks. And the president's cap and tax plan is going to cost about $2,100 for every man, woman, and child in our nation, or about $8,400 directly out of the purchasing power of an average family of four in the worst economy in a generation. You know, in normal times, people don't pay a lot of attention to public policy. That's why democracies occasionally drift off course. But when a crisis approaches, that's when you see a democracy engage. One by one, citizens sense the approach of a common danger, and they rise to the occasion. They focus, they look beyond the symbols and the rhetoric, and they begin to make very good decisions. Political majorities can shift very quickly in such times. Polls can reverse themselves almost overnight in such times, and I believe that that day is rapidly approaching. The radical policies now imposed on California are taking a dreadful toll on its economy and will become ever more dire in the days ahead. As the impact of these policies is felt, people will begin paying close attention to public policy making and the policy makers responsible, and then they'll begin exercising something that the majority of California's public officials have so completely lacked: simple common sense. Abraham Lincoln put it this way. He said, if the voters get their backsides too close to the fire, they'll just have to sit on the blisters for a while. Well, our nation's got some very painful blisters to sit on for a while, but in the process, because of organizations like Heartland, like Coleridge's Ancient Mariner, a sadder but a wiser nation will wake the morrow morn. Thank you very much.